We all remember growing up watching the cartoon Looney Tunes, and every time Elmer Fudd would appear on screen, we would laugh at him because of the way he spoke. Instead of saying his R's, he would place them with W's. So instead of saying that rascally rabbit, he would say that wascally wabbit. Therefore, Elmer Fudd suffered from a speech disorder called articulation disorder. According to the American Speech Language Hearing Association, in 2003, over 1 million children ages 3 to 21 suffered from a speech disorder. That's 24% of the 6 million children who suffer from disabilities. Now, that's an alarming rate because most people don't even know about speech disorders, and if they know anything, it's very little. But today, you all are going to learn about speech disorders, a specific one called articulation disorder. You're going to learn what articulation disorder is, why it occurs in children, and ways to help children, mostly therapies, that do have articulation disorder. When my youngest sister first started learning to speak, my mother saw no problem with the way her speech was coming along. However, when she was around the age of 3 or 4, my mom started noticing that she would misplace her R's for W. So instead of saying roses, she would say woses. Therefore, my youngest sister had the speech impediment articulation disorder. When she went into kindergarten, she was placed into a special class called speech language therapy class who helped children with articulation disorders such as she did. According to the American Speech Language Hearing Association, that's an association comprised of many doctors who specialize in speech. They said on their website in 2011 that if a child does suffer from articulation disorder, it's because they have problems making sounds. Mainly, they substitute a letter, they leave off parts of the word, or they add or change it. The most common is misplacing the R with a W, or they'll say, roses instead of roses, and if they leave it off, it's words like they'll say nana instead of banana. So it's pretty easy to tell if a child does suffer from articulation disorder. Now, while it's important to know if a child does suffer from articulation disorder, it's also important to know why the child does. Dr. Caroline Bowen, a doctor who specializes in speech pathology and children who do have speech disorders, stated in an interview on March 23, 2011, that articulation is a general term used in phonetics to denote the physiological movements involved in the modifying airflow in the vocal tract above the larynx to produce speech sounds. So that mainly means that the child, if they do have an articulation disorder, they have trouble placing their tongue, their mouth, and usually in their throat, they have problems with just speaking those words because of that. The Cincinnati Children's Medical Hospital stated on their website in 2011 that other reasons why a child can suffer from articulation disorder is caused by a cleft palate, the placement of their teeth, if they have a hearing disorder, their mouth, or neurological problems. Usually, if a child is not speaking by age 3, there should be concern and a doctor should be contacted because they may likely have a speaking disorder. And usually around age 8, the child will grow out of it with help. It's important to know what articulation disorder is, why it occurs, but most importantly, it's important to know if their child does have articulation disorder, ways to help the child overcome it. When my youngest sister we realized that she did have articulation disorder, she was placed in a speech language therapy class in her school. Most public schools have these, and they'll meet once or twice a week, about 1 or 2 hours, and they'll help the children learn how to overcome their speech impediment. If they have articulation disorder, they'll mainly show them how to place their tongue and how to place their mouth so that they can start to speak correctly. This really helps the child because most children with articulation disorder are embarrassed because they don't speak like the rest of their classmates. So this is also a boost for the children. Also, we use repetition for my youngest sister. My mother would use the sentence, "Richard really likes red roses," to help my sister overcome the speech impediment of articulation disorder. Therefore, she would always repeat the letter R, and eventually she did learn to overcome her articulation disorder, and now she says her R's correctly. There is also no known prevention for helping a child that does have a speech disorder, but if you do get them the therapy and help they need, the child will eventually overcome the disorder. It is important to know if a child suffers from articulation disorder, so you can get the child the help they need. Usually around 3, if a child isn't speaking, you should contact the doctor and get them help with their speaking disorder if they have one. And around age 8, with that help, they will overcome the disorder. So today, you have learned and you'll walk away with more knowledge of what articulation disorder is, why it occurs in children, and ways you can help the child overcome it.